Nigerian geopolitical intelligence platform SBM Intelligence has released an in-depth report on the impact of Nigeria's cash scarcity on the economy. Now, the report is titled Strapped, for cash strapped, and looks at the genesis of the Naira Redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria, along with its intentions, execution, and impact. Now, this is a historic moment, at least for me, because our analyst from SBM Intelligence is Kelechukwu Ogu, who, of course, is one of the individuals that penned this report. And Kelechukwu, you're very welcome. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I'm sorry, I apologize to you before we got on air, right? And because I have to shout out SBM Intelligence for having an analyst, a person with disabilities working, who put together this report. So before we even get to the report, Kelechukwu, I have to ask, what is it like, the Nigeria's business climate for a person with disabilities in the labor force? What's it like?
Okay, thank you for having me, and I did not expect this question.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, but I had to, because it's historic for me personally, because you're the first analyst, financial analyst, person with disabilities I've ever, engaged with. So please share.
Okay, yeah. So in 2020, Institute for Development Studies in the UK, in partnership with Sightsavers, did a report around employment for persons with disability. And their summation was that over 60% of the PWD population in Nigeria is unemployed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's
the straight answer.
That's the straight answer. So who's that 60%? The other 40% are employed by whom?
Majorly the government.
Majorly government?
Yes.
So the private sector is unfortunately not quite picking up the numbers for people with disabilities.
This is an anecdotal view, I should say.
Yeah.
But I do not know many persons, at least with visual impairments, who are employed in the private sector. Yeah, I don't.
Now, as a financial analyst, you're reviewing numbers, you're reviewing figures. How are you doing that? Using technology to be able to when you're because we've even been on radio together, Kelechukwu, and we hadn't even met at the time, and so we didn't meet, and we talked about it a lot. Answers were robust. So how does that work out for financial analysts?
So every blind person or visually impaired person, to sound correct, relies on text to speech. So that comes in form of screen readers on your phone or on your PC. Preferably for me, I'd like to have like braille displays, but that's like high-end markets.
High-end.
Yeah, but every person with visual impairment has a phone or a PC with a screen reader. So you find out the software you want to use. A lot of countries are a lot of developed countries are very sensitive about making sure the technology that has been produced in their climb is text-to-speech compliant with the accessible softwares. And I mean, those are the softwares we use, right? So that's it.
Thanks for that. And correction for me, sorry, I apologize. It's actually visually impaired. So as an analyst, working, visually impaired with respect to what you're doing. So let's get to the report, all right? Let's get to why you're here, all right? I want you to talk to us about this theoretical anatomy of policy, since we're talking about the report. But before we get to that, what's your general assessment of how the cash scarcity impacted businesses and individuals?
Yes, so my general assessment is that there was pent-up demand that could not be met, and that's down to the fact that cash was scarce. And so people would rather ration the little cash they had. Myself, I rationed the cash that I had.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of bounced digital transactions. And so that affected the desire of people to buy. And on the part of the sellers, they had to start making adjustments and getting POS terminals themselves to be able to serve customers. And those who did not make that shift, they suffered a lot.
Now, as far as policy decisions, intentions, reality parameters, stakeholder engagement, execution, is that lacking in Nigeria?
So when you want to conceptualize a policy, first off, you identify, there's a problem. And then it then starts out with you having a concept to say, how do I tackle that problem? And in my opinion, once you've done that, you can then have a conversation around stakeholder mapping. Who are the people that will be affected by this policy? And then what's the cost of the effect it will have, positively and negatively, and which outweighs the other? That's what you do, in my opinion, before you even start talking about implementation and setting milestones.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know how much of that was done.
Before
the Naira
this
Redesign
decision.
Policy, yes.
Okay, what about the objectives? If we look at the objectives for the Naira Redesign as listed by the central bank to stop counterfeiting. There was also to have more visibility over money supply. In financial inclusion was one of those objectives. What was it? Enhance, okay, yeah, so check counterfeiting, reduce cash management expenditures to promote financial inclusion. Now, I'm sure you might want to say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but surely, Kelechukwu, these intentions were, well, they were, what do you make of it?
I may have good intentions towards you, but the question is, what's the context?
Okay.
If the context is missing, then that intention might end up being bad, right?
Yeah.
So counterfeiting, for example, I think the data says like the average is 100 per million pieces of your currency.
Yeah.
And in 2019, I think it was 20 per million. In 2020, it was 13 per million.
Yep.
So why exactly then are you designing a policy to fix a problem that does not exist, right? So I've also had conversations around, okay, let's talk about financial inclusion, right? Financial inclusion had improved at least marginally between when FNA, Enhancing Financial Innovation Access, did their report in 2018 and the other one they did in 2020, which they released in 2021. There was a slight increase. That slight increase was down to the CBN creating new license tiers for mobile money operators and for digital banks. And you also remember that around 2019, 2020, they finally gave out in the license to, to go into digital banking. So we've seen some telecommunications guys come up with their own mobile banking infrastructure. And that has helped to increase financial access. But on the basis of that is that cash would be available in rural areas where you are not close to an ATM. And that's the reason why they would have enough confidence and trust to put their money in the bank. But when you then take away that cash, how then do the mobile money operators and the mobile money agents serve their rural population? So that was basically them working against financial inclusion.
Gotcha.
Just to mention, but a few of the points.
Just a few of the points.
Right.
Advisors. I sent you the exclusive interview we had with Tony Elumelu, right? Where he was asked by Bosun Omofaya, the host of Arise Exchange, why he doesn't follow Arise News on Instagram. He was talking about Femi Otedola, fellow billionaire's investment in Transcorp. I want you to take a listen to this part. I want to talk to you about advisors.
I think first, Femi Otedola is my very good friend.
That's good to know.
There are only two people I follow on the Instagram, my wife and Femi Otedola. That tells you the level of friendship that we have. And it's a man
You got to follow Arise.
Yeah.
You have to follow Arise.
Okay, I will consider that. My team will advise.
I will consider that my team will advise. He may have said it in jest, but the fact that it was an automatic thing that just came out, my team just to follow. By the way, everybody should follow Arise News, Arise News official on Instagram, and Arise TV on Twitter, including yourself, Kelechukwu. So, but. I will get back to you. My team will advise. When I know a lot of people want to put this at the foot. That's the Naira Redesign at the foot of the central bank. But the central bank did take this to the president. Did the president say my team will advise, Kelechukwu, when he was going to review this and approve?
He took ownership.
He took ownership.
Sole ownership.
Sole ownership of it.
Yes. But the finance minister did not. You remember that finance minister was like, she's not aware.
Right.
She's not sure it's going to work.
Yeah.
So it's like the finance ministry were sidetracked.
Right.
That's what it feels like. So
what about the role of advisors? There's been a lot of, pomp and pageantry, if you will, about the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. There's some big names on there.
I saw the report that they put out around the growth with poverty strategy some time back.
Yeah.
And it all again revolved around the social investment program, a lot of it, as to how they want to deal with poverty.
Yeah.
And then you ask yourself, in a country where tax to GDP ratio is like, what,
6-7%, yeah.
Where are you going to get the money? So you go and borrow like $1.3 billion from the World Bank to put into social safety nets that you're not going to get any return on investment from. You know, and you ask yourself, like, why are they doing this? But
yeah, gotcha. Okay, okay. Infrastructure keeps jumping out in your reports. Again, very in-depth reports on this cash scarcity. If we look at roads, for instance, what did the Naira Redesign policy and its execution tell us about Nigeria's roads from what you guys put in your report?
Yeah, so this report we also leaned on references from the beautiful work done by media houses.
Right.
And one of the reports that we referenced or linked in that work that we did was a data fight report around how access to cash in rural areas and IDP camps was really bad because they depend on mobile money operators, and the nearest bank to these guys would be like 1 hour, 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
And then you know that there are also mobile money operators and POS terminals near those banks. By the time they get there, due to like the bad roads and time it takes, they probably will see nothing. And then the question you ask yourself is how much cash was even getting to outside or fringe banks or banks like in peri-urban areas, where then money can then move to rural areas. I mean, if it was small in urban areas, it would have been smaller in peri-urban areas. And it would have meant that the rural areas already cut off on a norm were further cut off, by this scarcity.
The CBN did disburse agents. Well, what about their role? The agents that they disbursed to the rural areas to try to get the cash out there.
Rosus, if I gave you 10,000 naira in new notes and you could not get old notes, how long will it last you for?
Right. I get where you're going. All right, so that's road networks. What about the internet penetration? I think it's about 48.2 as of January. Fantastic. Yes. So what did the Naira Redesign tell us about what did it tell us about internet penetration in the country?
There are still reliability issues with digital transactions, especially when the volumes go up. And the reason is not really far-fetched. So Nigeria has about 6 marine cables, right?
Yeah.
And then you have like 54,000 kilometers of secondary infrastructure. But when you get to the last mile, the distance between the population and like the 5-kilometer distance between population and fiber optic network is 39%.
Yeah.
In Lagos, of course, is much higher in Lagos, but you get, so that means in other places is really, really low. So a lot of the internet service we get is from mobile communication. And so when you don't have like fiber optics all across the country, it means that in certain places, there will always be internet issues. There will always be issues with digital transactions. I mean, ask INEC what happened when they deployed beavers in Anambra in 2021.
Right.
People had to use bikes to go to some other local government to be able to upload results and all of that. So it will remain an issue. I think one of the network providers is trying to put 3G, strengthen 3G network in rural areas. So hopefully that would help with digital transactions. But the CBN should move at the pace that internet penetration is moving in creating policies. And they don't need to use the whip.
Yeah.
They just need to use the incentive that digital transactions are working, they are more reliable, use them.
POS agents, they got a lot of backlash, but was it fair? I mean, if the cash was scarce, the Economics 101 says, if an item is scarce, demand goes up, supply is down, then the price of it rises. What would you make of the POS? Was the backlash fair?
Relatively, I think. Because in some urban areas, it was over 30% of the amount of money you wanted to withdraw.
Right.
I understand this, but at the end of the day, the CBN created a black market. It created a means for mobile money operators to make a killing, and they did. But, I mean, not many of them used their church mind to set those prices.
Final question before we let you go, Kelechukwu. Right. The Supreme Court ruling is that the old notes are allowed to be circulated till the end of the year. What are we hoping for when the year is over?
There's a wonderful report we also cited from Business Day while putting this together. And that report said during the scarcity, the CBN was releasing the new notes at 25% of demand. So there's a cost incentive to it. I think making new notes the cost has increased from about 35 billion in 2016 to over 58 billion now, or something like that. And then Business Day did an analysis and said it would take up over 70 billion, 77 billion-ish to put the new notes out there, and another 6 billion to move it around the country. And so when you put all this together, and then there's always a limit. You ask anybody in print now meeting, they'll tell you there's a limit to how much volume or demand we can deal with. So we are hoping that by December, the CBN would have spread the money round and it would have reached you and I. But if it has not, we would wish that they would consider biting the dust and just humbling themselves and saying this didn't work. Yeah.
Kelechukwu Ogu, this is historic stuff discussion here. Thank you so much. One of the authors of the report, analyst with SBM Intelligence. Thank you very much for this very in-depth report on the impact of the Naira Redesign and cash scarcity on the Nigerian economy.
Thank you, Otis, for giving us the chance to talk about it.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks for your time.